Okay, so we are on Suratul Buruj. Sorry, my mind's up to that. No. Yeah, I think they're seeing the dates already in that student information guide. No. I don't know what the dates are, but we have a 1 week off. Yes. Which week I'm not sure. It's in the guide, inshallah. So we'll have 1 week off in the in holidays, inshallah. We'll have a extra long lesson here for the long weekend, inshallah. Now, I always find over the years that you must keep the class going, because you break 2 weeks, the nafs takes over. And Sunday morning is too liquor to, so I must deprive you of your nice Sunday mornings at home, so you can enjoy your Sunday mornings in class, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والسماء ذات البروج واليوم الموعود وشاهد ومشهود. Also an oath والسماء, by the heavens, by the skies, ذات البروج, that possessing al-buruj. Buruj can mean the bright star, but more commonly it means constellations, groupings of stars. وَالْيَوْمِ الْمَوْعُودِ, and the day al-maw'ud, the promised day, referring to the day of Qiyamah. وَشَاهِد, and a witness. وَمَشْهُود, and the one witnessed against. Mrs. Shahid is the witness, and the mashhud is the one that the testimony is brought to. So the shahid we mentioned here, there's different opinions with regard to it. Some mention the shahid, the witness will be Allah. Some mentions the angels. Some mention the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some mention the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So different opinions, because those are all included under shahid. So what happens with tafsir, and I think Dr. Bray asked me this, with tafsir sometimes we don't know the exact. We know that Allah is talking about how many shahids here? One shahid. Allah doesn't say wa shahiduna. Allah says one shahid. But the mufassirun will differ what the shahid is. Although all of them will be valid. Because Allah is a shahid on the Qiyamah. So are the angels are shahid. Your books are shahid. The Prophet is a shahid. Because they all come in ayat. Shahid, we are shuhada as well. So any of those could be applicable, and the ulama would differ, the scholars would differ of tafsir on which one is the intended one. Wa shahid, wa mashhud, and the one who is witnessed against. In other words, this is referring to human beings, that we will be mashhud. So that is the end of the oath. Then there's some difference of opinion with regard to what remember the oath has two parts. What to take an oath by and what to take an oath for. So some ulama say qutila ashabul ukhdud is the jawab of the oath. Meaning what is the second part of the oath. So yes, it could be, but some ulama say no, some ulama say no, it's not the second part of the oath. Why? For two reasons. The one is that normally you add a qad first, but that's a small reason. But the more common reason is that this wasn't something that was debated, this event. You know, this Ashab al-Ukhdud wasn't an event that people used to debate, like, is it true or not true? So when something is not debated or doubted, you don't normally take an oath for it. You with me? You don't take an oath for something which is like obvious. You with me? So some ulama will say, that is the jawab of the oath, or whatever the muqsamu alayhi. But some will say no, the muqsam alayhi is actually coming afterwards. So some ulama will say that the muqsama alayhi is going to be in Batash Rabbika la Shadid, in number 12. And all of this almost like just like in brackets, like parenthesis. And the actual muqsamu alayhi is actually coming a bit later. Okay. So then Allah says, Qutila ashabul ukhdud. Qutila means, literally means what?
Destroyed.
Literally means killed. Was killed ashabul ukhdud. The companions of the trench were killed. But that's the literal meaning. Literal means haqiqah. The literal meaning is not intended here. Because I don't think they were killed. The people who put the other people in the trench, they weren't killed, they just died like normal. There's no record of them being killed or like punished, or all of those things. So the qutila here has a metaphorical meaning. So metaphorical meaning in Arabic, qutila, one of two things. It can mean like la'ana, lu'ina, to be cursed. So qutila can also have the meaning of lu'ina, be cursed, the companions of the trench. It can also mean a dua against them. Like may they perish, may they be destroyed. The ashabul ukhdud, the companions of, ashab means companions, al-ukhdud means the trench. It's singular. It is the trench. As I mentioned before, I read the hadith now. Actually, there's a hadith about the trench, and we can see here. This hadith here comes in Jami' Tirmidhi. You can see the bab number, the bab name. What's the bab name there? Babun wa min Suratil Buruj. Meaning what? Imam Tirmidhi rahimahullah, he gets a narration of Ashabul Ukhdud. And then the Prophet doesn't give the narration as the tafsir of that ayah. He's just telling them a story about Ashabul Ukhdud. So Imam Tirmidhi rahimahullah will say, oh, that Ashabul Ukhdud, there's an ayah of Ukhdud, therefore this is most likely the tafsir of that. You with me? But there is a difference of opinion whether it actually refers to this actual story or to a different story. Let's read inshallah. Okay, we're going to go from the middle inshallah because he starts here. When he narrated this hadith, he would also narrate another hadith. And the hadith says there was a king amongst kings, and that king was a fortune teller, a kahin, who would see for him. No, sorry, he had a fortune teller. So he had a king. What's his name again now? I forget this king's name again.
King Nuwas.
It was?
Nuwas.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's Nuwas or Nawas, but one of those two. So Nuwas or Nawas. Nun wa alif sin. This king was in Yemen, and this was actually very shortly before the time of Nubuwwah. Like I can't remember like a number of years, I think 30, 40 years before. Nubuwwah is a recent story amongst the Arabs. So Prophet is telling this story. That there was this king, and he had a fortune teller who would basically tell fortunes for him. And the fortune teller says, search for a boy for me. He must be of understanding, like a clever boy, clever and quick, so I can teach him this knowledge of mine. For verily I fear I shall die, and this knowledge will be removed from you, and there will be no one amongst you that knows it. They looked for a boy fitting this description, and after finding one, they ordered him to tend to the fortune teller and to continue visiting him. So he began his frequent visits. And on the boy's route, there was a monk at his hermitage, Ma'mar. And so as he's going to the fortune teller, he's passing by this monk. So the monk obviously is Christian, from the Nasran, from the Ahlul Kitab. I think during that time, the people at the hermitage were Muslims. Not Muslims in the sense that the Prophet ﷺ, but Muslims in terms of they used to submit to Allah, like on the correct deen of the Ahlul Kitab. The boy began asking the monk questions each time he passed, and that he would not leave him until he informed him. And so he said, I worship only Allah. And so the boy began spending more time with the monk and arriving late at the fortune teller. The fortune teller sent a message to the boy's family saying he hardly ever attends me. The boy told the monk, and the monk said to him, when the fortune teller asks you where you've been, tell him I was with my family. And when your family asks him where you've been, tell him you're with the fortune teller. The kids know intuitively they do this. Now, one day, the boy passed by a large group of people being held back by a beast. Some of them said it was a lion. So the boy took a rock and said, "Oh Allah, if what that monk says is true, then I ask you to kill it." He threw the rock, killing the beast. The people began asking who killed it, and some of them replied it was the boy. They were terrified and said the boy has learned a knowledge that no one else has learned. A blind man heard about him, so he said, if you can return my sight, I shall give you this and that. He said to him, I do not want this from you. However, if your sight is returned, would you believe in the one who gave back to you? And then he said, yes. So he supplicated to Allah and he returned his sight, and the blind man believed. His case was conveyed to the king. What's the king's name again now? Nawas or Nawas. No. And they say this king was actually Jewish. In the riwayah, the king was actually a Jewish, even though most of Yemen at that time was mushrikun. That the king itself was actually was Jewish. So they conveyed this to the king, and he sent for him to be brought before him. He said, I shall kill each of you in a manner different than his comrade was killed. He called for the monk and the man who used to be blind. He placed a saw on the forehead of them and killed him. Then he killed the other by different means. Then he gave orders for the boy, take him to this or that mountain and throw him from its peak. They brought him to that mountain, and when they reached the place from where they intended to cast him off, they began tumbling off that mountain. And all of them fell down until none of them remained except the boy. He said, then he returned, and the king ordered that he be brought to the sea and cast into it. So he was brought out to the sea, but Allah drowned those who were with him, and he saved him. Then the boy said to the king, you will not kill me until you tie me to the trunk of a tree and shoot me. And when you shoot me, you say, in the name of Allah, the Lord of this boy. He said, so he ordered that he be tied, and when he shot him, he said, in the name of Allah, the Lord of this boy. The boy placed his hand upon his temple before he was shot, and then he died. The people said, this boy had knowledge no one else had. Verily, we believe in the Lord of this boy. He said, it was conveyed to the king. Your efforts have been thwarted by the opposition of these three. Now all these people oppose you. He said, so he had ditches dug, then firewood was filled into it, and a fire was lit. Then the king had all the people gathered and said to him, whoever leaves his religion, we shall leave him. And whoever does not leave, we shall cast him into this fire. So he began casting them into the ditch, and he said, Allah, blessed is he, the Most High. He said about that, cursed were the people of the ditch, of fire fed with fuel, until he reached the Almighty, worthy of praise. He said, as the boy was buried, he said it was mentioned that he was excavated during the time of Umar ibn Khattab, and his finger was at his temple, just as he had placed it when it was killed. They found him like this with his finger at his temple at the time that he was killed. I'm just wondering about this ayah here. So I see in this hadith, the Prophet actually mentions the ayah. Okay, so maybe in this hadith here, I find it strange because in the tafsir they mentioned that the Prophet didn't mention the ayah. There's hadith that the Prophet actually mentions the ayah. And therefore Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah actually puts this ayah into this chapter of the tafsir of Ukhdud. But there were other Ukhdud as well, in Abyssinia as well, in other places as well, like narrations of people putting people into trenches of fire. I think there were 3 different narrations at different places, and each of these narrations had different details and different variations to the story. So Bismillah. Qutila ashabul ukhdud. Qutila may be perished or are cursed the companions of the trench. An-nari dhatil waqud. So what is this ukhdud? This ukhdud is a trench, because normally a trench, you don't think of fire, you just think of a hole in the ground. So Allah mentions here the trench, meaning what? An-nari, meaning the trench that is filled with fire. That, what does that mean again? Possessing, containing what? Al-waqud. What's waqud? Fuel. So why did Allah mention that? A fire containing fuel. Not all fires have fuel. So why mention a fire containing fuel? Okay, that's more for like Jahannam. So in other words, Jahannam, they will see the people will be the fuel. But here we speak about just a normal fire. So all fires have fuel, but if Allah is mentioning it is a fire dhatil waqud, it was possessing of fuel, meaning there's abundance of firewood. You with me? Like Allah is mentioned specifically to indicate that it was well fueled, like a fire that was extremely hot and well fueled. It was dhatil waqud. It was possessing of this fire, of this fuel. Id, when, hum alayha qu'ud. Id means like bring to mind, this picture. When, whom, they, alayha, upon it, qu'ud. Qu'ud means what? To sit. Who does the whom refer to? So the whom can refer to three different groups of people. Is that the first thing that the whom can refer to is that when the king is ordering for the fire to be made and is ordering for the people to be brought to the fire, is he doing the work himself? So where do you think he is in this picture? He probably has like a seat and he's watching it. He's not getting his hands dirty. He probably has a seat there, his ministers are there, and you find the army people there. So in other words, the whom could refer to the king and his people, not to the army people. Because they actually, let's call it the more to blame, because they're the one giving the actual command. You with me? Could it refer to the king, basically, this Nawaz, could refer to the king, or it could refer to the actual army people. The people of the army were actually putting the people, who were actually sitting around the fire. Now the word alayha, what does ala mean? So ala means like if you have a fire, ala means on. But around in Arabic is hawla. Hawla means around. So if the king is sitting on the fire or not on the fire? The king is not on the fire, the arms are not on the fire, but the word ala in that case would actually mean close to the fire. You with me? Like ala almost like it's metaphorically like right by the fire. Right by the fire. Because that would happen. The other one could also mean, that some of us wouldn't say, is that the whom refers to the people being burnt. The people being burnt. And in that case, the ala is literal. That they were made to sit, they were tied up, and they were made to sit literally on the fire, and the fire was lit upon them. You with me? So then the ala would be literally upon the fire. Whereas if it's referring to the king and his army, it would mean metaphorically like close or around the fire. I think just in terms of the sequence, not in the sequence, in terms of the flow, for me the first opinion is the more stronger opinion. It's not the actual people, it's actually the king and his army. Because the ayah continues, وَهُمْ عَلَى مَا يَفْعَلُونَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ شُهُودٌ. So that whom there definitely refers to the king and his army. Doesn't refer to the people in the fire. Wahum. So idhum alayha qu'ud. And generally, qa'ada also means, what's the other word for qa'ada? For sit. Jalasa. Jalasa and qa'ada both mean sit, but qa'ada actually means to sit for a longer period. Also, another meaning of jalasa and sit is generally that qa'ada actually has the connotation of sitting from a standing position. And jalasa generally you can also use from sitting from a lying position. You with me? So generally someone comes into your house, like correctly in Arabic you won't say ijlis. Because ijlis means sit for a short time and it means generally sit from a lying position. You must use the amr uqud. Because uqud means what? Sit from a standing position and it means sit for a while. Like uqud. No. Uqud. But now the Egyptians don't say qaf. What do the Egyptians say? They make like for qaf, they make like a hamza or ain. So I just say uqud and you change the hamza ain to the qaf to hamza ain. How does it sound? Ud. So they come and say ud. It means actually uqud means sit. So if you go to Egypt, they say ud doesn't mean they have ud for me. It means it means have a seat. Udu. No. So this is like subtleties in the Arabic language. So here you can see here the word qa'ada would mean that they walked there. They were from a standing position and they sat down. They didn't sit down for a short time. Means what? They sat and they sat for a while and they watched this event. إِذْهُمْ عَلَيْهَا قُعُودٌ وَهُمْ عَلَى مَا يَفْعَلُونَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ شُهُودٌ وَهُمْ, and they, the king and his army, عَلَى, upon, ma, that which يَفْعَلُونَ, that which they were doing, بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ, to the believers. You can see Allah uses here the ismul fa'il. Why? Because they have the title of believers. Because if someone digs a fire and says, now you do believe, is it permissible for you to deny your belief in the face of death? Permissible. If someone says a gun to you and say, you can deny your belief because you can save your life. But here they didn't deny their belief. They still affirmed their belief and they were prepared to have like a gruesome death for it. Now, obviously, we don't know in their Sharia what their rulings were, but in Islam, you can deny your faith if you have. وَهُمْ, and they عَلَى مَا يَفْعَلُونَ, upon that which they did, بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ, with the believers, shuhud, they were witness. Did this word come before? Can you see the contrast in this? Just as people are committing evil and they're witnessing the results of their own evil, and evil people actually take pleasure in witnessing the evil. You know, they kill the enemy, they perceive the enemy, they take pleasure in that. They destroy something, they take pleasure in that. Like we're having a global war at the moment there are people who are taking pleasure in that, who are perpetrators and who are blowing up buildings, and actually they take a pleasure in that, and they take a pleasure in seeing it as well. And Allah is saying here, the shuhud, Allah mentioned before this, wa shahid wa mashhud. There will be an ultimate witness against those who are witnessing their own evil now. There will be an ultimate witness against them. Wa ma naqamu, wa ma, and not naqamu. What does naqamu mean? Okay, naqamu can mean to dislike something, like to dislike or to hate something. And naqamu can also mean to take a vengeance, take revenge. Allah often will say Allah is dhuntiqam. Allah is the possessor of retribution or the possessor of revenge. But here in the in this year, it means that they disliked. وَمَا نَقَمُوا, they did not dislike minhum, from them, illa, except, an, that yu'minu billahi, that they believed in Allah. Al-Aziz, the one with all might and all power. Al-Hamid. What's Hamid? It means the one who owns all praise, the one who deserves all praise. That praise belongs to this one. There's an interesting thing to think about here, especially if you consider that the king was Jewish. The king himself was Jewish. So you technically also what believe in Allah. And the person, the people he's killing also believe in Allah, but he dislikes them for it. He dislikes them for their firm faith, that they believe in Allah, that they stand firm in the belief in Allah. And like logically, you think it's like a strange thing, because you think someone who has a shared belief with you, that you'd be actually more have greater affinity for them. And is that the case in real life? Not really. If you think about it, the greatest enemy, or one of the great enemies of the Muslims now, is the Israeli government. And the greatest enemy would be people who actually stand firm on a faith that they actually kind of have a lot in common with. Which is actually interesting about, I don't know, I find it interesting, because not here in terms of mushrikun, like the Arab mushrikun opposing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're speaking about the Jewish king here. Okay, most of his followers are mushrikun, so maybe he has to also like avert them from taking up this faith, because then they might rebel against him and so on. But it's interesting that sometimes you can dislike someone who has something very similar to you. And I find that to be I don't know, like sometimes it's easy to dislike people who are similar to you. I don't know, like if you know what I mean, man. It's almost like if you even just think about like Muslim infighting. Like sometimes the way a Muslim feels to another group of Muslims is much more disliked than they feel to someone who's like on a different faith. Like a different faith is almost like, I don't even know what I mean, man. It's almost like within people who are similar to you, you sometimes feel like a much like stronger discord than some people who are very different to you. There may be other reasons for it, maybe because your similarities are more like fragile, or more like, I don't know, they can spark more differences. I'm just thinking also about like, but there may be other reasons for this. Anyway, وَمَا نَقَمُوا مِنْهُمْ, and they did not dislike from them, إِلَّا, except يُؤْمِنُوا, that they believe in Allah. Al-Aziz will be the sifa for Allah. The first sifa. This Allah has might and power, so what's going to happen? You're not going to submit to the might and power of the king. You must ask, why does Allah chose the sifas? Because they're in front of a fire and they see the might and power of the king. He dug a trench and he has this fire, but they believe in Allah, the one who has ultimate might. Al-Hamid, the king wants to be praised, but they believe in the one that Al-Hamid owns praise. All praise belongs to him. The king thinks he owns the land. Third sifa is Alladhi lahu mulku samawati wal ard. You can see why the sifas are chosen. Alladhi, the one, this Allah, Alladhi is going to be the third sifa. The one who, lahu mulku samawati wal ard, lahu, to him belongs mulku samawati wal ard, the dominion, the ownership of the heavens and the earth. If Alladhi is a sifa, what is the nahu of lahu and mulk? But we part Siratul Rasul, yes, but in Silatul Mawsul, so alladhi is going to be Ismul Mawsul, right? The one who. After Ismul Mawsul, then what comes after is almost like a standalone sentence. What is lahu mulku samawati wal ard? It's a jumla. Okay, let me ask you in English. To him belongs the ownership of the heavens and the earth. A sentence or not a sentence? Sentence. So whatever sentence is it? Whatever sentence is it? Ismiya. So where's the mubtada khabar? Yeah.
Is it
Online, where's the
delayed?
mubtada khabar? Carry on. Bismillah. Sahaba.
Is it the delayed mubtada maybe?
Delayed mubtada. The muk is the delayed mubtada. Lahu is a harfu jar ism majroor in place of the khabar. Why? Because normally it's say alladhi mulku samawati wal ardi lahu. With the mubtada first, with the khabar second. Why? Because therefore takhsis. So your third sifa also has takhsis in it. Meaning what? Your third sifa is saying alladhi, the one who, lahu, to him Allah and him alone. To him Allah and him exclusively is mulku samawati wal ard. Is the kingdom of the heavens and the earth. So those three sifat of Allah Ta'ala. The fact that Allah has all power, all might. The fact that Allah Ta'ala has all praise, and the fact that Allah Ta'ala owns everything. If you establish those three sifas, is there any power for anybody else? No. No matter how terrible the tyrant, no matter how bad the impending danger, if you believe Allah has all might and Allah deserves all praise and everything belongs to Allah Ta'ala, what is left in the worldly power? There's nothing left. And this is why these three are mentioned. Wallahu ala kulli shay'in shaheed. And Allah is ala kulli shay'in, upon all things Allah is shaheedun. Allah is a witness upon all things. What type of sentence is that? Jumla ismiya, is the mubtada and khabar? The word Allah, Lafzul Jalala, is the mubtada. Where is the khabar? Shaheedun. So in other words, it could have been Wallahu Shaheedun, and Allah is a witness. Ala kulli shay'in is going to be a harfu jar ism majroor. A harfu jar ism majroor is normally linked either to something. In this case, it's either linked to the mubtada or the khabar. Which one is it? Like if you attach the ala kulli shay'in, will you attach it to Allah or will you attach it to Shaheed? In other words, what is the ala kulli shay'in telling you? It's telling you more about Allah or more about Shaheed? It's telling you more actually about Shaheed. In other words, you could have said, Wallahu Shaheedun ala kulli shay'in. Because Allah is a witness over all things. You with me? So normally you normally say that actually. You normally say, Wallahu Shaheedun ala kulli shay'in. Because ala kulli shay'in is linked to the Shaheed. But see, here's not the khabar being brought forward. It's the thing linked to the khabar which is being brought before the khabar. Why? You can emphasize two things in the sentence. You can either emphasize the Shaheed part or the upon everything part. Here Allah is emphasizing the fact that Allah sees every single action. Wallahu, and Allah ala kulli shay'in, upon every single action emphasized. Shaheedun, he is a witness. But Shaheed is not the normal ismu fa'il. What's the ismu fa'il of Shahida? Ismu fa'il of Shahida? Shahid. Shahid. Shahid is normal ismu fa'il. If you have a fa'il Fa'il is what? One of the mubalagha forms. What does mubalagha mean? The intense forms. So if shahid means a witness, what does shahid mean? An intense witness, the greatest degree of witness. If Aziz is like a weird word, but Aziz is the same thing. Can you see Shahid, Aziz, Hamid, Alim, Khabir, all Fa'il. So what is Fa'il? That form Fa'il is what? It's called Sighatul Mubalagha. Let me write down for you so you can write down your notes, inshallah. It's called Sighatul Mubalagha. Sigha means the form, al-mubalagha. They normally say exaggerated, but we don't really know what exaggerate means in our time anymore, because the word exaggerate has changed in meanings. Sighatu al-mubalagha. You can work out the harakat, I'm sure. Sighatul mubalagha. This is the intensified form or the exaggerated form. That's not type of vergelijking. So type of vergelijking is something else. Yeah, like a hyperbolic form is. But some hyperbole has almost like the connotation of not true. Whereas this is like the true and actual hyperbole. But I'm like, because hyperbolic language is normally like exaggerating. But here it means the actual biggest. No. Yes, good. So basically, an makes the noon drop off. And makes the noon drop off. Okay, I think in your sound workbook, I put a new page in. I just snuck it in there. Yeah. Did I sneak it in here? Where did I put it in here? Did I put it in here? I'm sure I put it in here. Yeah. So basically, if you look at page 21, I went to the lesson now because the time's up now. But in 21, you can just see how the prefixes affect the verb. How the prefix. So I have example of an there. You can see the default is yaf'alu. If you put the an there, it becomes yaf'ala. Default is yaf'aluna. If you put the an, it becomes yaf'alu. So the an affects the encasing of the verb. But we'll do that a separate lesson, inshallah. So don't stress about it. But just you can just see the reference there to the notes, inshallah. Okay, so again at the end there Allah mentions Wallahu ala kulli shay'in shaheed, and Allah is upon every single thing Allah is shaheed. Allah is not just normal witness and like an intense witness, meaning what? The ultimate form of witness. The ultimate intensified form of witness. So the word shahida came out for the fourth time now. For the fourth time. In verse number 10, we're going to have a theme switch. Meaning what? Is Ashab al-Ukhdud contemporary or non-contemporary? In terms of the Prophet's time? Non-contemporary, it's a previous era. Then Allah is going to move the discussion to the contemporary era. Also, when you are reading this ayah, and we'll continue next week inshallah, but when you're reading this ayah, you must think, this is in Makkah period. This abuse and torture of Muslims is happening with them as well. With Bilal, with Khabbab, with Ala Yasir, with Sumayya. It's happening with them in this time the ayat are being revealed. So for us, sometimes like, oh, like a historical story, okay, they were persecuted and stuff. But for them, reading about Ashab al-Ukhdud is like it's like a real thing. Because people are really they're being killed. In my own like town, they're being killed for their belief. Now reading Ashab al-Ukhdud is like a real, like hits home for them. It hits home for them. So that's the spirit we have to read the surah in. It's like very real and tangible for the Sahaba to actually receive the surah. Barakallah, may Allah bless and protect. We carry on next week, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Zakaria will be with you shortly.